Hey guys, Bill here, and welcome to another episode of World Made Simple. Today we're doing something new, and that is going to be the start of, at least I think, a new series that I'm calling The State of. So, the state of what? Well, today I'm going to set what that is, but in the future, that's kind of going to be up to you guys. Today we're going to start with the United States Navy, though, and it's because it's the armed service that I'm most familiar with, and I think probably most of my viewers are as well. A lot of my viewers that I've seen are actually from overseas, not just from the United States, and the branch that anyone overseas usually intersects with the most is going to be the US Navy, simply because it goes everywhere. US Army forces are localized to the base, US Air Force normally just flies over, there's not really much staying power. Ships will sometimes anchor for weeks at a time, so it's a lot more exposure than the other two branches. So let's start with that and move forward. But what does the US Navy do? Well, the US Navy has one primary goal, and that is to ensure the freedom of navigation and open use of the seas. It does this via power projection, and the United States does a fantastic job with this. Great example is our carriers, so let's start talking out with them. Whenever anyone thinks about American sea power, they usually think about American aircraft carriers. These are behemoths of ships, 100,000 tons apiece. We have 11 of them. They are giants. These ships each can carry up to around 80 aircraft apiece, and we have two classes, being the Gerald R. Ford class, which we have one currently in service with one almost done with construction, two more on the way, and we have the Nimitz class that currently has 10 active vessels in the field, with one of them in the process of being decommissioned, being the Nimitz itself. These aircraft carriers are all nuclear powered and all over 100,000 tons. Very powerful, very effective craft, and are able to basically individually represent the strength of some national militaries. We use these to basically be a show of force. If an aircraft carrier shows up off a coastline, it's to deter anyone from doing anything. Any of our adversaries are going to say it's us showing aggression. Often, it can be viewed as that. These are big, intimidating ships. But more often than not, usually they're deployed because of an aggressive act in that area, or to show that the US presence is in that area. Now, these carriers are not by themselves. They're often surrounded by a flotilla of defensive screens, notably cruisers and destroyers. Let's start with the bigger of the two, being cruisers. The United States Navy is the only navy in the world to currently use cruisers in the fleet. The Japanese are actually building two more, if I recall. I believe they're over 30,000 tons. Our cruisers are the Ticonderoga class. I believe they're a little bit over 10,000 tons. These ships are old, around 40 to 30 years old, depending on the ship, and we're actually in the process of phasing these ships out of the fleet. There is a total of 9 of them in active service, with 9 more in reserve, totaling to 18 ships. There are no plans to bring more of these ships into service, and the reason is there's really not a purpose for these ships. Originally, they were supposed to deter larger assets, but nowadays there really isn't anything larger than them in the sea. So the Navy's retiring them and not planning on putting anything in their place, so our Ticonderogas will be our last cruiser class, at least for the time being. Now, let's move a step down to destroyers. Our destroyer type is the Arleigh Burke. I've talked about it on this channel before. She is a beautiful workhorse by every definition. The Arleigh Burke is kind of our flag model. If you see a destroyer, it's probably an Arleigh Burke. If it's waving the American flag, it definitely is an Arleigh Burke. Now, these ships are pretty effective. They are armed with just about every American defensive system and offensive system on the planet. You've got Tomahawk missiles, you've got Sea Sparrows, you've got Sea Whiz. Everything is on these boats. They're well-armed, well-defended ships. And their main job is to kind of do a bit of everything. They're meant to do fleet defense. They're meant to do ground strike. They're meant to do recon. They're meant to do anti-submarine missions. Arleigh Burke can pretty much do it all, and it's been a fantastic standard ship for the US Navy. However, it is starting to show its age at around a 40-year-old design. It was originally conceived in the 1980s and built starting in the 1990s. So the class is starting to show her age. Additionally, I mentioned this in our laser video, the ship's starting to run out of power for the new systems, including our upcoming laser defense systems. So the Burke's going to be limited by that, which means her time as our mainstay destroyer is coming to an end, and she's planned to be replaced by the DDX program. However, this is not coming out until the 2030s. That's because the ship meant to replace the Arleigh Burke was the Zumwalt class, and the Zumwalt class unfortunately proved to be way too costly to mass produce and went from 22 ships that were planned to just 3. So we're kind of in a little bit of a limbo until the finalizations for the DDX program come out. Now, going to the next size down is where things start going to a little bit of a problem with the US Navy. The US Navy had an idea known as the Littoral Combat Ship, or LCS. We had two ships in this class, being the Independence and the Freedom. These replaced our Oliver Hazard Perry class frigates that we had back in the 90s. And they really haven't done a good job with that. In fact, almost all of them are in the process of being retired. We have a grand total of 23 of them that are still in service. More than half of them are slated to be retired within the next 5 years. Yeah, not really good showing. The main reason is because their engines and a modular system that was designed for them really did not work well. It breaks quite frequently. They're overpowered ships that cannot handle the strain of their own engine. They're very fast ships, which was what they were built to do, but too fast for their hulls and too fast for their engines to be maintained properly. So the LCS ships are being removed. That means that we currently have really no good small-scale ships in our fleet. We do have a replacement coming up, which is the Constellation class. The Constellation class is based upon the FREM design from, I believe, it's the Italian and the French Navy. No idea when this is going to get into active duty, probably sometime in the 2030s. So once again, we have a bit of a time span between now and the activation of the first of the Constellation class. But the Navy might expedite that, we'll see. Now, in terms of the other ship classes we have, where we start getting into the Marine side of things. And I'm going to go over the Marines in a separate video if this series continues, but the Marine ships that we have for the Marines are known as amphibious assault ships, amphibious assault carriers, whatever term you want to use. There's a bunch of different variations. Moral of the story is it comes down to the America, Wasp, and San Antonio class that make up the backbone of this group. Unlike the other ships in this lineup that are 30, 40, sometimes 50 years old, these ships are actually relatively new, ranging from around 30 years old to just under 5 years old. So these ships are still modern and in service. This means that America's Navy still has a very effective way of deploying our ground forces on the seas. For example, the American class can drop around 1,000 Marines on any location within usually 24 hours. To our adversaries, that's a terrifying thought, and I know the Marines who are watching this are loving that idea. For example, if we have one of our assault carriers off the coast of, let's say, Taiwan, and we need to deploy those troops, it'll take a few hours and then they're on shore with armored and helicopter support. These things are very, very effective at moving these forces quickly. And it basically means the United States can deploy huge numbers of forces anywhere on the planet. And usually that's a very rare thing when it comes to naval warfare. So I'm gonna leave the Marines here for now. I know some people are already going, that's not the Marines, but I know it's not the Marines, it's still a Navy thing, so I'm gonna include it on that side of things, as they are listed as US Navy ships. So moving forward, I gotta talk about the silent service, and that of course being America's submarine fleet. Our submarine fleet is one of the most powerful in the world, and it comprises of 4 different classes, 3 of which being attack submarines, being the Seawolf, love that name, the Los Angeles, and the Virginia class. All of these ships are meant to go after enemy ships, sink them, and then retreat to a fair distance. Wolfpack, all that kind of good stuff. These ships are all nuclear powered and extremely dangerous if they get anywhere near any vessel, period. On the flip side, the other class of submarine we have is the Ohio class. We have 14 of these things, and they're what's called boomer subs. Shut up one person in the comments saying, okay, boomer. Okay, moving forward. Boomer subs are continent killers. These things have nuclear missiles aboard them. In total, at any point, anywhere on planet Earth, there's going to be at least 6 of these things deployed with nuclear missiles. There are 10 total with nuclear missiles. 4 of them have conventional Tomahawk missiles, which we've actually used before in combat. The nuclear ones we've never used in combat, thank God. In fact, the vast majority of America's nukes are not in the United States. They're on board these submarines, or in 1,000 nuclear warheads, or somewhere randomly in the ocean at any given point in time. It's an extremely good deterrence force, and it keeps most of our enemies up at night. If there's one ship that freaks the enemy out, it's not the American carriers, it's the American boomer subs. So, there's only one other group that we got to talk about in terms of the American Navy, and that's kind of the extra leftover ships that we have. Now, we have some submarine tenters, we have some mine layers, but the one I want to focus on is the oldest currently deployed ship in the fleet. And that is the Pueblo. And the Pueblo is kind of America's way of saying we're going to get it back eventually, because this is a ship that was actually seized by the North Korean military during the Korean War. It's still listed as in American service, even though it's been basically a prisoner of war since that war, so going on 70 years now. It's a weird story, but we still keep it, and I'm not sure if it's at this point because of spite or because we just don't really want to remove it because it's kind of a tradition. Now, that's it for the active ships. But there's one kind of active, inactive ship that I want to mention, and that is the oldest ship in the American Navy. And that's the USS Constitution. So for those of you who are unaware, we are one of the few nations to have an original ship from our first naval squadron still in active service and still in good condition. The USS Constitution, better known as Old Ironsides, is one of the oldest serving ships in the world. She's an old ship of the line, one of the original 6 frigates designed by the United States of America for the first US Navy, all the way back in the 1780s. She is still maintained and in good condition. She's often moored at Boston Harbor and is kind of a position of renown to be in within the United States Navy. And one other more fun fact, the largest naval facility on planet Earth is a forest in the Midwest. And specifically, this forest is grown and maintained to make sure we have the timbers to repair this ship. It's a fun little rabbit hole to go down. But that's kind of the scope of the United States Navy. We have very powerful surface fleet in terms of carriers, destroyers, and cruisers. We have a very potent submarine fleet in terms of our boomer subs and our attack subs. And we have a very effective and very aggressive marine transport fleet, meaning our amphibious assault ships. So this is kind of a new thing that I'm trying to do, see what you guys think about this, and see if simplifying these different groups into kind of a video like this would be something up your alley. But ultimately, that's up for you guys to tell me, and that's all I got to say about the American Navy, at least for today. So, with that, hope you guys have a good weekend, and I will see you once again on Monday. Take it easy.